Hello. This is the Bible in Fewer Words. We are Carol and Steve Wells. This is episode 251, the Gospel of Mark, chapters 5 and 6. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Carol. We're going to continue with the first Gospel. Even though Matthew's first in the Bible, Mark was written first. And some of these stories that we're going to cover today will sound familiar to those who have read the Gospel of Matthew, but they were told first in the Gospel of Mark, and so we're going to tell them here.
All right. Chapter 5. Jesus and his disciples went to the country of the Gadarenes. As they arrived, a man with an unclean spirit ran out of the tombs to meet Jesus. You know, he's getting chased by a lot of people with unclean spirits.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, that this story is told in Matthew. But if you compare them, they are a bit different from what we heard in Matthew and what we'll hear in Luke later.
Okay. The man was so wild that no one could constrain him, even with chains.
He spent all of his time, day and night, crying and cutting himself with stones. But as soon as he saw Jesus, he worshipped him and cried out with a loud voice, saying, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, you Son of the Most High God? I ask you in the name of God not to torment me."
Jesus said, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Jesus asked the unclean spirit, "What's your name?"
The unclean spirit answered, "Legion, because we are many."
So he's saying there are many devils in
it's
his
one
body?
guy, but he's got a lot of unclean spirits in him. So,
you know, I seem to remember, but I'm not supposed to talk about it, that when an unclean spirit leaves, then the body gets cleaned up, and the unclean spirit can't find any other body to go into, so he comes back to the body, and he says to his friends, "Hey, come join me here.
Yeah,
There's
seven
a nice
more.
clean
Seven
house."
of his friends come back. Yeah, that was from Matthew, right?
Yeah, so then maybe that's what legion is, when you have, 7 or 8.
Well, we'll find out it's a lot more than 7 or 8.
Oh, okay. At that time, there was a herd of pigs feeding in the nearby mountains. All the devils said to Jesus, "Hey, send us into the pigs." Wait a minute, take us out of this guy and send us into those pigs.
Exactly. So Jesus sent the devils into the pigs. There are around 2,000 of them.
Holy mackerel.
Who ran down the mountainside into the sea and drowned. Now, the Gospel of Matthew, he decided that 2,000, that's a little crazy.
But were there pigs?
There were pigs. There was a herd of pigs, but he didn't say how many. Mark said how many.
Wow. So those who cared for the pigs told the people in the city, and they went to see what had happened.
They saw the man who had been possessed with the devils sitting peacefully, fully clothed, in his right mind, and they were afraid.
I guess he was not beside himself.
Yeah, I guess not.
When they were told about the devils and the pigs, they asked Jesus to leave their part of the country because they were afraid that he had too much power.
There's a little more detail given in Matthew, remember? The people who owned the pigs were upset. You just killed all those pigs.
Yes,
it's like
you
our
owe
whole
us some
livelihood
money.
here.
Okay, verse 22. A synagogue ruler named Jairus fell at Jesus' feet and said, "My daughter is deathly ill. Please come and heal her."
Jesus went with him, and many people followed him. Among them was a woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years. She spent all of her money on physicians whose treatment only made her condition worse.
Well, that's not a good doctor. She approached Jesus from behind, touched his garment, and said, "If I can just touch his clothes, I'll be healed."
As soon as she touched his clothes, she stopped bleeding and was healed.
Jesus felt the virtue go out of him and said, "Who touched my clothes?" Well, that's an interesting way of feeling.
It is a strange thing to say, but that's what it says.
His virtue went out of him.
Yeah, he could feel that somebody took some of his powers away from him there. Yeah. The woman fell down in front of Jesus and said that she did.
Jesus said to her, "Your faith has cured you." All right, can we stop there?
Yeah.
He is amazed at her faith, or her nerve to go up to Jesus and touch his robe. I mean, he could just turn around and his virtue could just kill her dead.
It's true, yeah. I think he's just saying that
you so believed in me so much that
Yeah.
you could just touch my robe and you would be better.
right.
That you are.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
While Jesus said this, a messenger said to Jairus, "Your daughter is dead." Jesus said to the ruler, "Don't be afraid, only believe."
Like that woman that I just cured there. Believe
right.
like her.
Yeah, just touch my clothes, she'll be okay.
That's right. When they arrived at Jairus' house, Jesus said to the people who were crying, "Why are you crying? The child isn't dead. She's sleeping."
And everyone laughed at him. Jesus took the girl by the hand and said, "Stand up." And the girl stood up and walked. Jesus told them not to tell anyone what had happened.
Again, his humility is overwhelming.
Yeah, I guess
But
that's
nobody
what it is.
listens to him. They all go around telling how the great things Jesus was doing. Chapter 6. Jesus and his disciples came to his home country. And what is his home country?
He's really been in his home country pretty much all this time, his home country of Galilee, right?
Oh, okay.
But now I think he's coming to Nazareth because that's where he was from.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the Sabbath day, he taught in the synagogue, and everyone was amazed, saying, "Where did he learn all these things? Isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary?" I don't know. Jesus, are you the son of Mary?
So this is a strange thing here because the other Gospels say, "Isn't he the carpenter's son?" He's the son of Joseph, the carpenter.
Yes.
So they're saying he's a carpenter.
Yeah. But has he ever built anything?
Not that we know of. But I guess he was a carpenter. They knew him as a carpenter, and they knew him as the son of Mary. And that's a strange thing because usually a man is known not as the son of his mother. He's known as the son of his father. You would say, "Isn't this Joseph's son?"
Yeah.
You wouldn't say this is the son of Mary because that's,
Yeah.
they don't trace a person's
Lineage.
through the mother.
Wrongly, of course.
Oh, yeah,
It's
sure.
the only person
Right.
you should trace
Anyway,
the lineage.
this is the only place in the entire Gospel of Mark that Mary is mentioned by name. I'm kind of giving stuff away.
Yeah, that's okay.
But she was mentioned before, but
not
only,
by name.
Not by name. Here she's mentioned by name.
Uh-huh. Well, it's about time.
Yeah.
Isn't he the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Don't his sisters live here? And they were offended by him. Okay, who was offended by him?
All the people apparently of his hometown.
Oh, like,
She's
what
saying,
the heck?
"This is our local boy, the carpenter, son of Mary. He's got these 4 brothers and some sisters.
Uh-huh.
What's the deal with him? Why does he think he's so special?" I think is what they're saying.
Oh.
He's just a regular guy from town.
Yeah.
Jesus said, "A prophet is honored everywhere, but in his own country, among his own family, and in his own house."
And he couldn't do any mighty work there, except for heal a few sick people. And Jesus was surprised they didn't believe in him.
Yeah. It is surprising, isn't
Yeah,
it?
he's a homeboy.
Yeah.
Hasn't impressed them enough.
Yeah, here it's not saying that his family didn't so much believe, although it's kind of implied. I'm not honored by, even in my own house, kind of by my own family, my own people. Yeah.
Verse 7. Jesus sent the 12 off by twos and gave them power over unclean spirits. He told them to take nothing with them but a staff, no bag, food or money, and to wear sandals and only one coat.
Jesus said to them, "When you enter a house, stay there until you leave. If they won't let you stay with them, shake off the dust from your feet as a testimony against them. It'll be worse for that city than Sodom and Gomorrah."
Oh my gosh, what if they don't have room for them? Like if you don't,
That's right.
if they
Or
can't
they don't,
stay here.
or they don't like you preaching very
You're
much.
preaching, yeah.
Right. When he says that they don't accept you and let them into your house, it'll be worse for them than for Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
It's debated as to what the sin of Sodom was, right?
They're all spilling their seed on the ground, or they're having homosexual sex.
Okay, it had nothing to do with spilling seed on the ground. At least there's nothing in Genesis about that. There is a story in Genesis about spilling seed on the ground, but that's Onan, right? It's a
Yes.
whole different
Okay.
thing. But there were a bunch of guys that wanted to have sex with the angels. There was that.
Oh, yes.
In other places in the Bible, in Ezekiel, for example, it says that the sin was that they weren't hospitable. You know, they weren't.
Yes.
They had guests there, right?
Uh-huh.
And they didn't honor their guests. They treated the guests badly. That's something you just don't want to do. That's really bad.
Yeah.
And so if you are staying with people and they won't let you stay or they don't treat you well, it'll be worse for them than it was for Sodom and Gomorrah. Because you're being inhospitable to them, just like the people of Sodom were. So you're going to get it.
Yes.
They went out and preached, cast out many devils, and cured sick people by anointing them with oil.
When King Herod heard about Jesus, he said, "He's John the Baptist, whom I beheaded, risen from the dead." Others said Jesus was Elijah or one of the prophets.
Yeah. That's a really strange couple of verses there. The reason it'll seem strange is because John the Baptist apparently is still alive, because he hasn't even been imprisoned yet.
Oh.
Because in the next verse says, Herod had imprisoned John at his wife Herodias' request.
Mm-hmm.
So he either was imprisoned or he had just been imprisoned.
Yeah.
And Herod is saying, you know that Jesus guy? He's the risen John the Baptist.
Because I beheaded him.
Because I beheaded him.
But he hadn't beheaded him yet.
He hasn't been beheaded yet. Because and we're going to have that later in the chapter.
The beheading of John the Baptist.
So it's strange because he would think that he was John the Baptist who had been beheaded when he hadn't been beheaded yet. Mm-hmm. But even if he had, it would be a strange thing to think, oh, it's probably John the Baptist. I beheaded him. He's returned, and Jesus guy is the beheaded John the Baptist.
With a head.
Yeah, that's right. He grew his head back. Or some people are saying it's Elijah. It's just strange that people at the time would come up with such crazy ideas. I mean, who would say, oh, that guy's over there, he's probably some person that's died. It's probably him, risen from the dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's bizarre. Okay, verse 17. Herod had imprisoned John at his wife's Herodias' request, because John had said, "It's against the law for you to marry your brother's wife." So Herodias wanted John killed. But Herod was afraid of John, and he listened to him and believed what he said. Really, Herod believed him.
Yeah, I think that Herod kind of liked John, but his wife was mad at him because he said he shouldn't
have married her.
On Herod's birthday, there was a birthday party for him. Herodias' daughter danced for Herod and his guests.
Herod said to her, "Whatever you ask of me, I'll give you, up to half my kingdom." And she asked her mother Herodias, and she said, "Ask for the head of John the Baptist." So the daughter said to Herod, "I'd like the head of John the Baptist on a plate, please."
Herod didn't want to grant her request, but he had to, since he promised in front of all of his guests.
If it was a promise in secret, he could have just said, "No way."
Yeah, that's right.
So he sent an executioner to bring John the Baptist's head to him on a plate, and he gave it to Herodias' daughter. Okay, so now he could say, "Hey, that guy I just beheaded," because that would be an appropriate
Jesus is
time.
probably, risen John the Baptist. Yeah, I think maybe Mark just got it out of order a little bit.
Could be.
Yeah. Jesus and his disciples traveled by boat to a place in the desert. But the people saw them leaving, so they ran together from all cities and came to Jesus.
The disciples came to Jesus and said, "Send those people away so they could buy food to eat." Jesus said, "Give them something to eat." And his disciples said to him, "We don't have enough money to buy food for them."
Jesus said, "How many loaves of bread do you have?" They answered, 5 loaves and 2 fishes.
Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, blessed the food, broke the loaves, and gave it to his disciples to give to the people. And the people ate as much as they wanted, with 12 baskets left over. About 5,000 men were fed, and maybe a couple women and children.
Maybe. As soon as the people finished eating, Jesus sent them away and left with his disciples on a boat to Bethsaida.
When they arrived, Jesus went on a mountain to pray. In the evening, the boat was on the sea, and Jesus was on land. Before dawn the next morning, Jesus came towards them, walking on the water.
He would have walked right past them, but they saw him and cried out, thinking he was a spirit.
Jesus walked over to them and said, "Be happy. Don't worry. It's me. Don't be afraid."
He walked up to them, and the wind stopped blowing. And they were amazed and wondered, because they didn't understand the miracle of the loaves, because their hearts were hardened. They didn't understand the miracle of the loaves.
And is this the second miracle of the loaves or the first one?
It's the first one. The second one's coming still.
Okay.
But they had this miracle of the loaves recently. They didn't consider the miracle of the loaves because their hearts were hardened.
And who hardens hearts, Steve?
No, they were just, that's the way their hearts were. It doesn't say that God hardened them or anything. You know, he hardened the Pharaoh's heart, you know, back in the day.
A whole bunch of times.
A bunch of times. But here it just says their hearts were hardened. So they didn't understand how he could calm this storm. Do we have a storm going on here?
Yes, the wind stopped blowing.
Okay.
And how he could walk on water?
Well,
No?
they don't even mention that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think what they're saying, he's been doing all this great stuff. They didn't remember that he just fed 5,000 people with a few loaves of bread.
Didn't remember or didn't understand how that could be or didn't consider?
They didn't consider it. The actual verse is, "For they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their hearts were hardened." Not long ago, but maybe a miracle or two ago, he did the 5 loaves.
Yes.
Then he did the walking on the water.
Yes.
Now he calms the sea.
Yeah.
And they were like amazed. Because their hearts were hardened, and they didn't consider the miracle of the loaves.
Okay. Mark wrote this?
Yeah, Mark.
Or somebody, it was attributed to Mark, but we don't know.
Right. Yeah, probably nobody named Mark. It was cleaned up a bit by the other Gospels.
He doesn't want credit for this.
Well, no,
This is a mess.
kind of rewritten or overwritten. You know,
Yeah.
like they started with these stories that we're reading here, and then...
And they're having the same trouble. They were having the same trouble
So
we're
what
having.
are you saying here, Mark? They're going...
We're going to rewrite this so
let's
people will understand.
Let's try to make some sense out of this.
All right, so now we're back to the penultimate and the last line of this episode. They went over by boat to the land of Gennesaret. In every city, the sick were brought to Jesus, and everyone who touched the hem of his robe was healed. They also robbed him of his virtue while they were doing that.
That's right.
Okay, well, that was quite an episode.
Yeah, it was.
And
For a bunch of stories that we've already heard before. Mostly.
I know.
Yeah.
But, we have to say how they're different.
I have to say that they're different. And, Mark was the first one to tell these stories. Mm-hmm. So we need to tell it like Mark told it.
Yeah. And pay attention to what Mark said.
It wasn't really Mark, but whoever.
Yes.
I guess we should say that whenever we talk about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we're not really talking about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
No.
Because we don't know who wrote them. But it's convenient to call the author Mark, so we're doing that.
Yes. It's like, what was Dr. Seuss's real name? I think it's Thaddeus Geisel, Geisel.
Yeah, I don't know.
And you don't know what I'm getting at?
No, I do.
That he's using somebody else's name.
Right.
Yeah. All right, on that note, we're going to say goodbye to our listeners, and I'm going to say thanks to you for all your work, honey.
Sure.
Okay, bye-bye, listeners.
Bye.